The first meeting of the Council of State for the Tinubu administration held this week in Abuja, and we give you the details today on the program. President Tinubu received the vote of confidence during that Council of State meeting, and it's caused quite a reaction, seeing as many Nigerians have been raising concerns about a deterioration in their quality of life, thanks, they say, to the policies of the present government. My guest helps us understand the situation, and we ask if the Nigerian is just impatient. All these and more on this week's edition of Dateline Abuja. Hello and welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Kayla Megwa. Let's catch up with the major stories from Nigeria's presidency. It's time for our Abuja Wrap.
The Minister of Defense, Mr. Abubakar Badaru, says Nigeria is on the verge of signing a bilateral agreement that will help ensure security on her borders and the Gulf of Guinea. The minister was speaking in Equatorial Guinea as part of the delegation that accompanied President Bola Tinubu on a 3-day official visit.
There are discussions on defense agreement, not signed yet, but there is a joint committee for joint patrol, policing and security on our borders and the Gulf of Guinea. And that discussion is on, and when constituted, I'm sure we will have robust engagement or patrols on the sea that will prevent all illegalities happening around the Gulf of Guinea.
President Bola Tinubu has emphasized the need for the country to enhance its energy competitiveness and bring about transformative changes and prosperity to Nigeria. He was speaking while commissioning 30 hybrid buses capable of using compressed natural gas and diesel. The ceremony took place at the State House after the Federal Executive Council meeting. The President had earlier sworn in Mrs. Didi Wilson-Jack as head of service of the Federation. The Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, has said that the recent Supreme Court judgment granting full financial autonomy to local government councils will enhance Nigeria's universal basic education system and warns against abuse. He stated this at the public presentation of a book titled Navigating the Politics of Universal Education Policies in Nigeria, written by a former Deputy Governor of Ekiti State, Professor Modupe Adelabu, held in Abuja. The Vice President says the autonomy of local governments, which are directly responsible for providing primary education, will address the financial limitations that have hindered the alignment of administrative units with the government's educational agenda. Senator Shettima also assured that the ongoing reforms initiated by President Bola Tinubu will address inadequacies and ideologies frustrating universal education in the country. If you have no capacity to work, resign. This is a charge from the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mr. Nyesom Wike, during the swearing-in of the newly appointed permanent and mandate secretaries for the Federal Capital Territory in Abuja. He charged the new appointees to be proactive in carrying out their duties and not to be distracted by the position.
If the president has fulfilled his own part, it is for you now to sit down and work with us and work with me and say, look, these are the programs we think that will help the youth. We think will make the youth to be entrepreneurial in nature, will help them to reduce the effects of hardship that they are facing.
Welcome back. The National Council of State has passed a vote of confidence on President Bola Tinubu for what it describes as the achievements made in the last 1 year. The council passed the vote during its first meeting under the administration of the president at the presidential villa in Abuja. Briefing State House correspondents shortly after the meeting, Governor Abdulrahman Abdulrazak of Kwara State said the council commended the president for policy decisions he has taken since assuming office. Take a look. It is the first National Council of State meeting of this administration. In attendance are governors, the President of the Senate, some ministers, and former Chief Justices of Nigeria, as well as presidential aides. Former Presidents Muhammadu Buhari and Goodluck Ebele Jonathan were physically present, while retired Generals Abubakar Abdulsalam and Yakubu Gowon joined the meeting virtually. President Bola Tinubu arrives to preside over the meeting. Over 4 hours later, a delegation arrives to outline the highlights of the meeting. As expected, the recent hardship protests were considered, following a report by the National Security Advisor, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, on the security situation in the country and the protest.
The council thanked Nigerians at large for resisting any unconstitutional move to change government. If anybody is not satisfied with the government, any current administration, there's always an election coming. So you wait for election and cast your vote the way you deem fit. So after the NSA's briefing, generally he allayed everybody's fears and spoke on the tightness of the security around the country, and also reassured all and sundry that nobody will be allowed to truncate our hard-earned democracy. Any change of government has to be through the ballots and not through the barrel of the gun or through insurrection or through any other unconstitutional means. Only through the ballot box.
Aside from Mr. Alake, 6 other ministers made presentations to the council on the progress made in each sector of the economy, with emphasis on economic diversification. According to the Minister of Finance, the council commended the economic drive of the current administration, which according to him is yielding positive results.
In broad terms, the economy is growing. The balance of payments, in particular, the trade balance and the current account balance, are in surplus. The exchange rate is stabilizing. And inflation, though high, uncomfortably high for the liking of Mr. President and his team, it is slowing and it is set to fall. But in particular, there has been support for the economy from investors, foreign investors by way of portfolio investors, domestic investors who are participating in important private-public partnerships, particularly in the infrastructure sector. And foreign direct investment is beginning to recover, I would say. So on that basis, we looked at we reported on, in particular, the opportunities for the economy once stabilized for investment and growth.
The Kwara State Governor said the council commended the president after listening to the presentations by the ministers.
The high note of the meeting was the unanimous passage of a vote of confidence on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces. Members, especially those of the Nigerian Governors Forum, were satisfied with the presentation by the members of the Federal Executive Council. And after that meeting, there was an executive session between members of the Nigerian Governors Forum and Mr. President. And frank and fruitful discussions were held between both parties. And I'm glad to say we're on the right track. And in the same vein, members of the NGF also, like the members of the Council of State, passed a vote of confidence on Mr. President. We also wish him well and prayed for God's guidance for him.
A vote of confidence on President Tinubu from the Council of State has elicited reactions from several quarters, one of which is from the Economic Community of West African States, particularly as regards concerns raised by Nigeria's National Security Advisor on a hijack of the End Bad Governance protests by forces interested in an unconstitutional change of government.
The concern is not about the right of people, the young people, the unemployed, and others who feel that they are being shortchanged. They are hungry and they are angry. So that right is enshrined in the Constitution, and I think the Nigerian government allowed for peaceful demonstration. That is the beauty of democracy. The other aspect of it is the demonstration being hijacked by interest in order to move the agenda beyond the immediate concerns of the demonstrators. And that is going as far as calling for the military to step in. And the worst of it all is the flying of foreign flags during, these demonstrations, in the country. And it reflects a wider malaise in the region that for some time now, West Africa and Africa broadly is becoming an arena of a new Cold War, where the NATO powers and their followers, the BRICS, you are talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and what have you, and their supporters on the other hand, and then you've got in the middle powers, middle-level power from the Middle East and others, who are all now involved in the political discourse and developments in Africa. So if you look at the color of the flags, and I don't want to name them, it reflects this divide. What are the characteristics? Those flying those flags are mimicking where the region has experienced military takeovers in the country.
For other groups like Action Aid Nigeria, the vote of confidence did not come as a surprise, and they speak on the role of the Council of State as well as the issue of funding protests in general.
If you've noticed, whenever there's an incident like this, a Council of State meeting is always called. So if you go to NSAS, immediately after the NSAS, there's a Council of Meeting. So it's a way of the government trying to get validation. Say, okay, we've got not just the government of the day, but other leaders of the country still in support. So it's a way of saying, oh, Nigerians, we're not just here alone. Even past leaders, the Council of State, those that are relevant in that sense, are backing us. How would you explain the vote of confidence? I think that's pushing it. But the question is, do they serve the purpose of being the conscience of the country? I think that should be the fundamental question. If they exist just for advisory purpose. So technically, the president is not at will to take whatever comes from there. So it's just advisory purpose.
It sends a very troubling signal. So beyond just those funds coming in, sends a signal of the people not satisfied. So those in diaspora, if all those money came from diaspora and they were able to send in that much, those monies would have been used for several other things in the country. So for people to feed, for people to infrastructure, so many things. But for us to have 83 billion naira.
That's the allegation.
So yes, that's the allegation. So let's take the NSA by its word. So if that funding is coming in, it shows that a good number of persons are concerned about the issues. And there is no breakdown of if this funding is coming from Nigerians or non-Nigerians.
Whether the protests were employed to enforce unconstitutional regime change, or if the vote of confidence passed on President Tinubu by the Council of State is just the government of the day seeking validation from past administrations, one thing is certain. In Nigeria's case, the deterioration of the quality of life of the Nigerian is a cesspool from which all kinds of illegalities can be derived. And while the federal government says it is doing what it can to check this deterioration, the trust deficit between the Nigerian people and governments in Nigeria at all levels must be fixed and soon, so as to get the buy-in of the Nigerian as the government focuses on long-term benefits of the sacrifices it is asking of the Nigerian people at this time. To understand the role of the Council of State, what the vote of confidence on the president means, and the reactions to this story, we have political analyst Jide Ojo on the show. Please watch this. Mr. Jide Ojo, welcome again to Dateline Abuja.
My pleasure, Kayla. Thanks for having me.
Let's get right to it. When you heard the vote of confidence that was given to the president by the Council of State, what were the thoughts that came into your head?
I'm not surprised. I wasn't surprised at all, given the fact that, historically speaking, National Council of State is an advisory body. It has no executive power. Whatever they say does not, will not carry a lot of weight. And usually, being former presidents and governors and ministers, they definitely will not speak ill of their colleague in power. I mean, which of the former presidents wants to talk ill of the current one when our problems were cumulative? You cannot say I'm the golden boy, I'm the star boy, so I did no wrong during my tenure. So to that extent, you cannot exonerate yourself, and it's better to err on the side of caution. For a smart leader, you will know that this is just, well, it's an endorsement that is that will massage his ego, but not as much as the kind of validation that it will have been appreciated if it's the popularity rating of Nigerians of him that has increased.
Former presidents Ibrahim Babangida and Olusegun Obasanjo were not at that meeting. Did it mean anything politically? Especially since former President Olusegun Obasanjo had said some things just before that meeting.
No, the person that's what I was coming to. The person whose absence was conspicuous, as the media would like to paint it, conspicuously absent.
Yes.
Is Obasanjo, because we know former head of state Ibrahim Babangida. I don't know. People are insinuating that he has health challenge and has not been seen traveling. People usually goes to visit him. But maybe you could have joined virtually like Gowon and Abdulsalami Abubakar. For whatever reason, he was not able to join. But that is understandable. You have never had any scathing remarks from IBB about any administration since after he left office. But Obasanjo has been very critical of every administration after him.
With his letters.
Nobody had done anything commendable as far as he's concerned. So he has become more like an irritant. People just say, when you were there, did you do any better? You are the longest serving president. What did you do? So last week he addressed press and came out smoking, condemned the National Assembly, not his first time. He has called them unprintable names in time past. Talked about, Tinubu shouldn't have done this, removal of subsidy was ill-timed and all of that. But he's a man that speaks his mind at every point in time. And you cannot begrudge him on that count. He's entitled to his opinion. In a democracy, majority will always carry the day. Even if you were there and he raised objection, they will not report that except for former President Obasanjo. They will just say the Council of State. Because in a room where you have maybe 100 people, if you are the only one that dissented, you are just minority. And as we say in democracy, minority will have their say, majority will have their way. So he knows that very well. So he knew, and he absented himself. But I think former President Obasanjo also needs to tone down his rhetorics because it's becoming like attention-seeking. For me, it's becoming like that.
We are running out of time, but I want you to be able to talk a little bit about what the NSA said at that Council of State meeting, that briefing that he made. Of course, we didn't get to hear it firsthand. What we heard was what was reported after that closed-door meeting. And of course, the concept of the protests being politically motivated and was and the phrase that has been trending really since that meeting is that the protest was an illegal means of regime change. And then we have that dynamic in our country right now where we hear that many people used the End Bad Governance protest as some way of trying to change government, and then the lootings that happen. But then, of course, it brings up the conversation about people who genuinely want better governance, not a change of government, but better governance, seeing as the quality of their lives have deteriorated. Let's talk a bit about that dynamic and the arrests. We've heard of some arrests done so far. What do you make of this scenario, and what's the way forward?
Thank you, Kayla. Let me make this clarification. The protest was not organic. That End Bad Governance protest was not organic. There are various groups with various agendas. So those who spearheaded it were genuine protesters. They wanted to call attention to the issue of bad governance and hunger in the land. But there are also other groups who were calling, obviously, for regime change. You heard that. Your station played that clips. You had live transmission of that protest. So when people started handing out Russian flag and calling for regime change up north, you cannot say that it was not politically motivated. Even though some of those who spearheaded this protest in the Southwest, some of them are politicians. I know one of them who was a former presidential candidate. You understand? And then some of the frontline presidential candidates were also endorsing. At least Peter Obi came out and endorsed. Atiku Abubakar came out and endorsed. Even in the face of mindless looting that was happening in northern part of Nigeria.
When we're talking about, the quality of life of the Nigerian, vis-a-vis this political interest and the hijackings and things like that, what should the presidency be doing going forward?
It's obvious. I mean, there's no two way about it. They need to address the grievances of the citizens. The popularity rating of President Tinubu is nosediving, is pointing south, and to show up that support, to make people smile, to make people laud him for his initiatives, he needs to double down on issues around, rising cost of living. Yes, it may not be only Nigeria that is suffering there, but we are Nigerians. We are not in Europe. We are not in any other Africa. So we are more concerned with our own country. So to that extent, all his lieutenants, and here I'm talking about ministers, all his aides, one, they need to cut down substantially on their luxurious lifestyle. See the rough fight about how much a senator has. One says, it's 1,060,000, and another is saying, I get 21 million. So, and they are trying to rationalize. This is time for sacrifice, for God's sake. You cannot be earning that kind of ostentatious, that kind of quantum of money in the midst of, abject poverty, and you think people will not be restive. We do have to wrap it up there, but I want to thank you so much, Mr. Jidodio, for making out the time to be with us on Dateline Abuja, and good luck with all the work you have ahead of you. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks to my guest and to everyone who spoke to us today on the program. Times are hard, so stay safe. And remember, you can let us know the happenings in your neighborhood using the social media handle showing right now on your screens. Thank you so much for watching. I am Kayla Magwa. See you next time.